Welcome, everybody. I am beyond excited today because I get to interview this amazing human that you can see on your screens. Lou Featherstone is as she calls, an accidental influencer who found herself with a massive following on Instagram, which is how I found her. And I was just like, who is this woman? She brings joy, delight, energy, vitality, and a lot of things onto her page that for many of us as older women can sometimes feel might be lacking. And Lou's purpose at the moment is to inspire women, but maybe people in general, to step out of their comfort zones and into their magic. Lou, it's such a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Actually, do you know what? My male following's growing, I'll have you know.
Oh, that's great to hear. Why do you think that is? Let's start there.
I don't know. It was interesting, actually. Last summer, I was invited to the Do Lectures, which is the most incredible weekend of creative people who gather together. Amazing couple put it on in Wales, and everybody stays the whole weekend. And it's a series of speakers through the weekend, and they're all just ordinary people like me doing extraordinary things or interesting things that inspire other people. And there's only 100 participants and 15 speakers, and it's just the most glorious, uplifting weekend. Beautiful fires, amazing food, super workshops and experiences. And I was talking at that, which was a huge honor. And I parked, I was in the middle of a tour in America, which we can talk about later, on my RV, and I'd parked that, flown back to do this talk. And they'd said, please do a talk that you've never really done before. So I was talking about vulnerability and what it's like living life out loud and putting all my life out online, and the good bits and the bad bits of that. And, living life, dressed like this, for example, or, things like that. And when I got up to, and also I talk quite a lot about my separation and my divorce and that process and the self-love revolution that I find myself on. And I got up to stand up at the lectern, and I'm like, and I look out and I'm like, shit, half of them are men. When I do, I forgot to ask you if it's all right to swear, sorry.
Yes.
And normally when I do a talk or one of my, my speeches, it's to women and women's groups. And predominantly my audience on Instagram thinks, oh, it's like, oh God, well, I'm not going to change it anyway. But I started talking, and I talked a lot about, being vulnerable and the power that gives me, and how, the joy that I find in that. And at the end of the talk, there was questions and answers. And the very last question, this guy goes, could I ask, is there any advice you would give to your husband now on reflection? And the whole room sort of like gasped, because it was obviously like asking for a friend. And it was
a great question
for a man to be that vulnerable. I found it unusual, because I'm not often in big groups of men who open up quite like that. And then the rest of the weekend I spent talking to men. There was lines of men wanting to talk to me about how to be more vulnerable in their businesses, for their female colleagues, for how do they show up better for their wives or their partners or their daughters, how are they more vulnerable in their business. And I was like, blew my mind. It blew my mind. And it was actually quite incredible. So I'm now a lot more conscious of the fact there's a lot of really angry women, angry, rightly so, out there, but I have a bit of a different way of doing things. But yeah, I found it is amazing, and I made so many amazing connections with loads of really lovely blokes who just I'm chatting away to about their business and helping them out and doing stuff, which I've always just mainly gone for women. Women-owned businesses, I've always made a priority to work with them. And
yeah, I think I actually want to stay with that for a moment, because I'd love to know what your answer was.
Shagger more. My answer.
I mean, really, like, if we unpick that a bit, for me, what that is about intimacy and connection. Those kind of feelings that in longer term relationships can easily just drift apart, and that suddenly we're not meeting this other person. And it's interesting to me that you're getting more men following you as well, because I think one of the reasons I call this series Being Human is because I'm starting to really identify that there are so many things as human beings that we share in our struggles, you know, whether it's vulnerability for men, whether it's being outspoken for women, you know, whatever it is, it's some of it is obviously very clearly gender based by what we've been conditioned by. And a really big part of your message is breaking through those conditionings and programming. So, and by the way, that event sounds awesome. Yeah, incredible.
If you ever get the opportunity, you have to apply quite early in advance. Seriously, it was a game changer speaking at it. The people I met were just so incredible. And it is all, you know, it's about connection, and that was a huge part of why I took my bus on tour. So I'll just take over the interview. Shall I let you ask a question?
Well, no, you see, no, this is great. I really want it to have this informal quality. And, you know, that's probably where we are meeting each other, because I'm like that. I'm really big on connection. I love talking to people. I love finding out what drives people. And now I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I will ask you a question, because you were not always the woman that we see now who's this influencer on social media, mainly with your fashion and your clothes, but also you are working with a line of sex toys, which I'd like to know more about. You've bought your RV, which was a big edge for you. There's so many things that you're bringing in to say to people, yes, you can, rather than no, you can't. So what was your life like before? Let's start at the beginning. What did you do before you did all that?
Before I did all that, well, I think it starts being a vicar's daughter. That's the bottom line. Yeah, I was a vicar's daughter of a very charismatic Church of England vicar, who was married to my mum, obviously, or not obviously. Those vicars are naughty, but Sue, who was a probation officer who worked with Category A offenders. She worked mainly with paedophiles, so she was quite an incredible human. And I grew up in a busy vicarage and busy parish, and I just loved growing up in community. I mean, it was tricky. My dad was everywhere. He ran the church youth club. I couldn't get up to no good. He was always there's everywhere. Choir practice. Everybody knew him. I was always in trouble. And if I ever got into mischief, someone had told my dad. So that was annoying. But I just loved growing up with that sense of community, I think. And wherever we went, you know, we moved quite a lot. Which I found, I don't know, I think that's given me the best bits of me and the worst bits of me. You know, I can move and start again, you know, and ironically, when I had my son, I said to my husband then, you know, please, can we just live in one place? I want my son to know where he's from. I want him to have roots, because it felt really important to me. And we did. We had such a good life in Brighton. We lived there for his first 10 years of his life. And then my husband got offered a job in America, and we moved my son to the other side of the world instead. But I carried on moving my whole life. I wanted to be a social worker. And back in those days, like the 80s, you had to be 21 to go on the degree course. Imagine that. And so they said, go off and get some experience. I went to work for Bernardo's with young offenders in Cardiff. I went to Berlin and worked as a youth worker for British Forces kids that lived out there. I was a Club 18 to 30 rep and ran kids' holidays in Portugal and down in the Algarve and Tenerife, Portugal. And then I came back to London with an electrician from Kent that I'd met in the Algarve. And I got into the health fitness business for a bit. I ran the creche. And then I got into advertising. One of the clients who came to the health club offered me a job in their advertising company. And I moved into advertising. Oh, I love that. Parties, drugs, film sets, photo shoot. Well, it was ace. It was so much fun. In the 90s in advertising, it was all money. And I worked for a wicked ad agency. We were doing some really cool ads at the time. Do you remember the old Tango ads, Slap and Pop Noodle? Like, it was a super cool agency at the time. I got into organising. I was in charge of staff motivation by the time I left. I did the internal comms and all the parties. And
I wonder why.
I don't know. I was so good at that job though. And I would spend the last 30 years wondering how I can recreate that. And I feel like I'm finally getting there now. Yeah, it was amazing. I took the whole company to Amsterdam for a trip. Oh, it was wild. Anyway, but there was, I don't know, I've always had this nagging that it's not just about me. You know, I always kept going back to the social work. And then I had Oscar. We moved to Brighton. I had a horrific pregnancy. I hated it. I hated giving birth. I hated him for the first 2 years, probably. I was just like, hello, what about me? The birth was awful. I had terrible postnatal depression, which I hid from everybody. I was completely lost. My husband had a fabulous, glamorous job up in London going, he carried on commuting, and I was just alone with Oscar. I say that like I was resentful at the time. I wasn't, he had a great job, we had good money, it was super cool, but it was really lonely. And then I started working for a baby swimming company, which was super fun for a while, but it was still, things weren't right, nothing felt right. And then I got a job. They were looking for family support workers for social services. So I went to work for Brighton and Hove Social Services, and I was a family support worker. So where families were in crisis and the kids were about to be removed from care, I'd go into the family home and do parenting skills, budgeting, get the kids in a routine and get them to school, help parents understand the need to clean the house, clean their teeth.
Can I just stop you there a minute, Lou? Because you just said in that job that you were in just prior to this, you said nothing felt quite right. And I'd really like to just rest there for a moment, because I think that that will be a piece that many people also will resonate with, where we're living a life and we're doing things, and there might not be really obvious things on the surface. Like you've already said, you had money, you had a nice house, blah, 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 blah. What can you say more about what it was that didn't feel right that took you into the other job?
I don't know. It was just a nagging, and I've described my marriage like this. Not at this point, only in the last sort of 2 or 3 years. I want to really be clear. I was very happy. We were happy, it was general marriage, there wasn't enough sex. He worked late. We didn't make enough time for each other, and that fell into neglect. But there was a nagging discontent, I guess, is the only way I can describe it. Like and I don't know if I sort of sat around, I didn't sit around feeling unhappy all the time, but just like, there must be more, there must be more, there must be more. And I think I was chair of the PTA at school. So that helped. I got super involved in the community. And then I started to really find my joy, because I've always been, if I do something fun, I want everyone to come with me. So I started the school camp. So the school camp phenomenon, my dad ran youth club camps at church, and I loved them. They're my most happiest memories, usually getting caught in the boys' tent or getting a boy caught in our tent anyway. We'd gather together, we'd all cook together, we were all in teams, all the jobs, you did cook together, you went get the wood for the fire together. I don't know, that was just so much fun, singing, dancing around the fire, services, whatever. And so when Oscar started at school, I was like, right, school camp. And that first year, I think there was 15 families. We were all in a little circle. And it was just so much fun. And so then the next year it grew, and it's still going now 16 years later, and there's the whole of Brighton and Hove all now go on the school camps. I ruined all the campsites all around Brighton and Hove. I'm very proud of that, actually.
So so from that, obviously getting that sense of, oh, hang on a minute, there's something more fulfilling. How did you have to go into training to work with the families at that point?
No, there was a job on reception, so I took that, and within 3 days I was like, I don't want to be answering the phone. I want to be getting in the car and working with these kids. They're coming into reception, and I really quickly, within 2 or 3 months, was like, I want to do that. And so I went on every training course they would send me on, and this was, when was this? The good old days, Labour and government, and there was preventative work, and they wanted to train people to, it was just, it made so much sense. We made loads, and the privilege of going into someone's house at the lowest point of their life and helping them maybe see a different way. Yeah. It is incredibly hard. There were times where, I'd have to recommend children were removed and from their families and, go to court. And families I'd worked with for months and months, but genuinely couldn't say they're fine, they'll be all right, when you genuinely feel they aren't. But if you have tried everything, then it's, when you get to that point that that's the best thing for everybody, but you have to have tried everything. And I think I always would say to the parents, try your hardest. And then, if the worst does happen and you do get separated, if your kid comes looking for you in a few years and go, what the fuck? I got put into care. Could you not have tried a bit harder? You could say, I tried my hardest. I couldn't do it. But at least you can say that. And then you can somehow, hopefully you can live. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So, and I think that's how I feel about my life. If
Mm.
I just keep going. I'm always on Instagram going, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. On a hard day, I'm just keep swimming, because I know if I'm having a bad day, I've learned, and this is the best thing I think I've probably learned, and this was on loads of levels. There's little things like the bus. The bus was a really good example. I am 100 miles an hour, a complete control freak. Buying the bus and driving around America on my own, I'm going to burst into tears, was so scary. And it went really wrong. I broke down. I was so hot. I thought I was going to pass out. But every time I got to a really low point, something incredible would happen. Mm. And I had this amazing pause in my life where, I went for it. I created it. I made it happen. I was like, all right, that's what I want to do. This is my vision. How do I do it? And I just kept doing it in steps. I was like, get the bus. Okay, got the bus. Crowdfunded the bus because I didn't have the money. Had the idea, saw a bus, crowdfunded the bus because I couldn't afford it, and then was like, now what do I do? I've got to do this now. So then I set about getting sponsors for the tour who would support me on tour and who I could support in return. So used I owned small women-owned mainly businesses and approached them for sponsorship. Mm-hmm. So, I'll do you 20 reels. I'll have your brand, I'll have your vibrators hanging from the bus as I'm driving along, So kind of did deals with them for sponsorship, and they all got their brands on the bus, and they were all very much invested in my journey, because I was like, this is my vision. I don't know if it's going to work. And the vision really was circling back to the connections. So as an influencer who shares a lot online, a lot of people share with me a very deep secrets and concerns and worries. And I take that responsibility quite seriously. And sometimes it's quite a lot. I don't know if I'm surprised I'm crying. Again, it's a privilege. It's like working with the families, and I take it seriously. And I have to be prepared. So, for example, when my mum died, I shared a lot about her Alzheimer's. My direct messages would be hundreds of messages deep with people sharing their sadness about their mums. And lots of me is like, gosh, is it sad that people will share this with me? I love that they have a connection with me, and I've made that connection. I love that. And I love that I'm in a position to make people feel better. That's also a privilege. But isn't it's sad in some ways, or maybe it's easier to share with a stranger, or maybe I've just triggered something in somebody. But I was like, I want to meet these people and see if they're real, and, bring them together, because actually women find it incredibly hard to find each other, or, new friends. You make friends at school, don't you? You make friends in stages. You're at friends at school when you're at school, then you get married and you make joint friends, and then the kids start school and you make friends with the school mums, and, they're not always necessarily your people, but the kids become friends and then you become friends. It's fascinating. And then but sometimes then in later life, then kids have gone on school, and we're all particularly middle-aged, kids are leaving home, and you're like, what's next for me? And you start looking around. So I wanted to help people connect. So the idea with the bus was that I would drive around America, and I would stop and throw events and gather like-minded women together in their area, and then off I'd go to the next town and have fun in between. So that was the vision. And also throw vibrators out of the bus as I drove through the Bible Belt of America. And you know what I did? I did it. Fun Factory, the vibrator sponsor, gave me so many vibrator samples. I had hundreds in the back of the bus, that anybody who came on board the bus got vibrator. They got a little can of gin and tonic from my gin sponsors. It was brilliant. It was so much fun. But the bus, and so I painted the bus really bright and breezy, like, it looked like me, green and pink leopard print. And so and with self-love revolution all over it. Mm. And so the idea of the bus was obviously that she was captivating. Well, let me tell you, that worked. There's I would be driving down the freeway, and I've got trucks going, rah, rah, and people out the sunroof of their car waving. And my Instagram and website's on the back of the bus, and I'd park up and hook up and pour a gin and tonic and be like, well, that was a good drive. And I open my emails, and there's all these emails from people who've driven past me, or look me up on Instagram. And then in the RV parks around 6 o'clock, everybody comes out of their RVs, because everybody sits in their RVs because it's so hot. They're all there. They're all indoors. You don't see anybody. It's not like going British camping and everyone's out playing in the field. Everyone's in the buses. It's so weird. and I also picked a really bad route and went the wrong way for the heat. But anyway, lessons learned. About 6 o'clock, everybody comes out with cocktail and the dog, and they all go for a walk, and everyone's like having a little chill around, and it's super fun. And of course, everybody stops. And the men, if they're in a couple, the men will go, what bus is that? And I go, oh, you know, it's a 1983 Bluebird Wonder Lodge. And they go, oh, is it a school bus converted? Anyway, they want to talk about the engine. So I wow them with my facts, because I now know everything about bloody buses and HGVs. And the wives are like, what are you up to? So I'm like, well, you know, I've just left my husband and I'm on a tour of America trying to empower women to step out their comfort zone and embrace their middle age. And the wives high five me, and the husband's like, move away from this woman. Don't get any ideas. I had a cab driver asked me what I was doing, an Uber driver, and I told him, and he was like, you're a divorce influencer. I was like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do in the slightest. What I actually try to do is encourage women to have confidence in themselves and a courage to come to their relationship as a partner, because that's what our marriage separation is not really his fault. It was mine. I didn't consider myself a partner or an equal partner. He earned all the money. You know, I facilitated, you know, I didn't facilitate his whole career. Obviously, he has his own talents. But I made sure he was able to do what he needed to do by doing things that didn't make me feel quite right.
Yeah.
So circling all the way back again, because I take a very long time and go off on a tangent, going back to what you were saying, the nagging discontent, I think, was the fact that I was so far down the list of importance. I didn't see it like that at the time, but I was stealing money from work. I was overspending. I was stealing money from work at that time when I worked for the baby swimming company. And the boss caught me stealing and let me keep my job while I paid the money back. That was one of the most incredible acts of kindness that anyone's ever showed me in my life. She could have had me arrested and sent to jail. And it's an incredibly shameful part of my past, of which you know, we all carry shame for things we've done and decisions, and shame for decisions that weren't ours and things people did to us. And actually I've only just really started talking about it. I used to one of the things was like, as we can see, I go off on a tangent. I'm like, when you're off on a tangent, don't start telling people that you stole money from work. And actually, I did it for the first time on quite a big podcast with Dawn Porter. And then I talked about it again on another podcast with Mother Pucker, Dirty Mother Pucker. And oh my God, my inbox is just like when mum's Alzheimer's, the inbox just went wild. So many women living in financial shame, being financially controlled by partners. It's opened my eyes quite a lot. And I've been thinking about how to talk about that more for women, because it's obviously a huge problem. And so I've given up shopping again for the year. Again, because I
saw that and I was really intrigued, because I thought, wow, you know, because a lot of what you create, by the way, I just want to say, you know, one of the things that I really, really appreciate about you is your transparency. You know, and the fact that you're promoting this self-love revolution, and we hear a lot of talk about self-love, but often it's things that people can't quite relate to, because it might be kind of, you know, bubble baths and rose oil and self-massage, and then people are so far away from that. So to be able to come into this outspoken, heart-centered transparency that you bring forward is super important, because I think that's where we find the places of shame and hiding and regret and guilt and all of that human stuff. That's what this whole series is about, bringing that forward.
I think people are always like, you're always happy, you can't always be happy. And I'm like, of course I'm not always happy, I'm bloody human. And when I'm not happy, you could mostly see it on the internet. But I have really learned, I don't know, I started trying to say this, I think, with Susie, was that I threw out...
Susie being your van, your RV.
Being the bus, I had to relinquish all the control. Like, she broke down, she would only go at 50 miles an hour, the weather was so hot, she kept overheating. So I had to adapt and change, just sort of like, and go at her pace. And it was interesting because every time she broke down, it was when someone was coming to do a bit of a journey with me. Like I had friends fly in from England and Portland, they flew down, jump on the bus, and then we had a week to get them to the next spot. And every time someone came, she broke down and we didn't go anywhere. My sister came all the way to Austin in Texas and we just sat broken down. I mean, we had a good time when we were there, but it was like, oh God, she didn't get a trip. So, and I realized that every time she broken down, because I was like, fuck's sake, you broke down every time someone was here and I wanted to take them on a trip. And actually, I think she broke down because I had someone with me so they could support me. Every time I've just found, every time I'm going through a bad patch or something bad's happening, I actually find myself getting a little bit excited because I know that it means that something really, if I'm scared, I know I'm doing something that's going to change my life. Or if I'm finding it really hard, I know that it means I'm going to get somewhere better. And the non-shopping project, last time I did the non-shopping project, which is about 11 years ago, I was 41 and I was just desperate to change my habits because I was just spending too much money. It changed my life. I learned, it was that year, the end of the year, I realized I felt proud of myself, which is very, very, very rare. And it was it was so rare that I went, what's that feeling? And I felt proud of myself and confident. I was like, okay. So I went, oh, I feel confident. Oh, you know, when you're like, oh, reel yourself back in, love, you know, simmer down, you know, not so great. And I was like, no, oh my God. And imagine that, if I could do that, what else could I do? If I actually put my mind to it. And I kept going around going to people, what could I do? What could I possibly do? I could do anything. And I really remember that feeling. And then I spent the next few years going, what is it? What is it that I want to do? Because I'm going to be great at it. But it was the beginning of this journey because I started, my whole style changed because I had to restyle my wardrobe. I had just wore what I owned, obviously. And I was very worried as an addict. I believed that everybody liked me, or it was so important. My clothes were such an important part of me, but it had to be new. And that was what people talked about. They wanted to talk about that it was new. And I'd seen it in a magazine and I rushed out and got it. And I was impressing them with the fact that I was wearing the latest thing.
Yeah.
That I was worried that I genuinely remember thinking, what will people talk to me about? And now when you listen to alcoholics talk, they're like, you know, I'm the life and the soul of the party. What if I'm not that when I stop drinking? What if it's the booze? But then with the clothes, I started to mix and match things a bit differently and wear them in different ways and be outlandish to cheer myself up. If I couldn't buy something, I started wearing a sequin cardigan to social services work, you know, and people were more excited by that than they were the fact that stuff was new, you know, that was more fun. And I had much more fun, interesting conversations with people. So that year, my style really changed. I really found my confidence with that and started talking about that more. I was one of the first people online to do outfit of the day. Instagram wasn't even around then, but I had a blog and I made my poor son take my picture every day for the whole year, a different outfit every day. I haven't.
It's making up for those 2 years where you were like, I hate you. It's like, take my photo.
No, and I'm such an idiot because I haven't been doing it. And what is it? Now it's like the 19th of January or something. And I haven't been taking my picture every day. But so then I thought, you know what, obviously it's been expensive moving home. Emigrating has broken me a bit. And then buying things for the house, you know, I've been running around buying very essential ceramic flamingos. But I also did a lot of vintage shopping while I was on the tour. I was sort of frantically raiding the most amazing vintage spots. And because it's only $6, I'll go, oh, I'll have 8 because it's only $6. So I came home, it cost me a fortune to ship it all back. And I got it to this house and it's just ludicrous. So I'm got to slow down and I'm a bit all or nothing. So it's best for me just to, you know, not shop. I wish I'd kind of allowed myself a few more get out clauses. There was a lot of small businesses and people I should be supporting this year, but I think
there might be other ways you can support them though.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a vintage pop-up. I've got other vintage vendors coming. I'm going to sell a bunch of my clothes. I'm renting out the clothes. So I might add a rule, whereas if I rented out my clothes I own, I could maybe buy something new. I could don't change my rules. I can do what I like.
Well, they're just like the Pirates Code. They're just guidelines. That's how I see it anyway. So Susie came with you to the UK, did she?
Susie is coming. Let's say
Right.
I finished in New York and I was so anxious that I wouldn't even get there. You know, I was in Nashville for a month waiting for the wrong part, then the right part, then we didn't even need that part. Then there's another, you know, it was just, I'm never going to get there. So I'd done some rough research on shipping her, not quite enough. And also I hadn't accounted for the ports are just completely jam-packed. So she's currently in storage in New Jersey waiting for a spot, and I've had an email this week from the shipping company saying there might be a spot from Baltimore, so I might have to nip out to New York and drive her down to Baltimore, get her on the ship, and then she'll come into Liverpool.
Right.
And the plan is to start spreading the joy in the UK and drive her around the UK.
Oh my God, please can I come with you? Honestly, I really, honestly, you know, I mean, I guess this is bringing me to my next point, which is like, you know, your story's remarkable and relatable on so many levels, and I personally relate to you said something about, you know, all the times you've moved giving you both the best of you and the worst of you. You know, my family background, my daughter went through a list of creating all the addresses she'd had as a child with us growing up, and she said to me, Mum, she said there's something like 25 on there, and she was 23 at the time, and she said, you know, but in a way, it's given, on the one hand, it's given them this capacity, this knowing that they will be okay anywhere, as you described, that they can move, that they can set themselves up. They're not afraid of travel. They would go abroad. In fact, that daughter now lives in Germany. They would go abroad at the drop of a hat, and they're not intimidated by that. And for so many people, they stay in their comfort zone. So bringing this back to you, this is what you encourage and inspire people to do, to step out of those comfort zones. And of course, every experience like that does have its shadow side where you can feel ungrounded, unrooted, that you just want stability. But as my friend said to me this morning, she said to me, Steph, she said, every family has got their stories. And she said, and this happens to be your story, because I was sharing, I've known her for 20 years and she was sharing something with me. And she said, you know, can you just forgive yourself and be with all of that, all of the bits where you think you've failed and not done enough as a mum, or, you know, whatever else it is, because she said, the way I see it, you're doing an incredible job. And I'm sure you do too, because you are shining that light of what you can do in life with strong self-belief. And of course, that's not unwavering. And of course, that will falter sometimes, or you'll be vulnerable, to bring it back to vulnerability. But now, what is your mission now as you move forward into this new life in the UK? We're very lucky to have you. You know, what's your purpose?
I don't know. I mean, I loved America, and I had an amazing time. It was an amazing opportunity to go and live in another country. I had no idea how different our cultures are. Not a clue. And it's just monumentally different. I appreciate so much, and they're just they're positive to be around. You know, they're just so uplifting, and they're so whoop, whoop, you know, about everything. And I really found my people that way. But I don't know. I think the health insurance is just so brutal. The racism is just catastrophically painful. It's not any less catastrophically painful here. It's just different, and nobody really talks about it. In fact, on reflection, I would say America's conversation around racism a lot further ahead than it is here. So actually, I've already proved myself very wrong on that, because, you know, I'm coming from a place of very white privilege. But as a person who's trying to find what sits right, America's, you know, race relations certainly don't sit right in my soul, women's rights, you know. And so for lots of those reasons, there were a lot of arguments, and I met a lot of very inspirational women, particularly in Austin. You know, I was saying, how the fuck do you live in Texas? Austin, love it. How do you live in Texas? How do you live here where vibrators and abortion are illegal? It's like, blows my mind. These smart, and they're like, this is where we need to be to fight. And I felt so ashamed of myself. I was like, yeah, all right, well, I'm just going because I don't like this. But also, there, you know, the health insurance, the difference, there's so much disparity in America. I felt incredibly uncomfortable, because there's just nothing in the middle. You either have or you have not. You're black, you're white, you're Republican, you're Democrat. And I just felt
Mm.
I know, and never the twain shall meet. Which I feel like, which, you know, was a very scary part of the tour for me, going down to Texas and all the very the Bible Belt countries down there, you know, Arkansas, those sorts of places. I was like, what the heck? I cried like a baby coming over the Texas border. So scared. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but, you know, I was like, these people, they're going to Google me on the bus and they're going to either hate me. I'm waving my vibrators, dancing around in my knickers. I'm everything that a good Christian girl actually probably shouldn't be. Ironically, I'm a bloody Christian and my father's a vicar, but, you know, whatever. We have a different kind of Christianity, or maybe I tend to go for the less judgy Christian version. But anyway, and I had the most amazing conversations with the people that I don't agree with. And I think that was part of going, was to push myself to do those things. Like, you know, it's really dangerous, isn't it, on social media, especially, you know, someone says a racist comment, you unfollow them, you know, someone disagrees with you, you block them. And we curate this curated life where we think everybody thinks like us. Nobody thinks, you know,
Confirmation bias, it's called, apparently.
Yeah, and so we just avoid that. Well, I just drove into it with vibrator in hand to have conversations, and I managed to have some really amazing conversations, and I learned so much, and that's what I wanted to do. So, for example, I met some amazing racist lesbians in New Mexico. They came over, they were like, it was quite funny because they obviously Googled me, pretending that they hadn't, because I don't know why they did that, but it was obviously that they had. Funny. We had a good chat. I was like, oh, they're from Florida, which, you know, sometimes can make you, oh God, you know, Florida, it's going to be interesting. There's some great characters come out of Florida in politics for a bit. Well, they're lesbians, and we can, you know, we'll get on. Two retired postal workers, and we're chatting away. We're having a great conversation, and then I mentioned Nike, the brand, and of course they sponsor Kaepernick, who is the sportsman who knelt for the national anthem, lost his career. And was a huge, you know, people were burning flags, and it was horrendous time, and he's awful. Anyway, they mentioned him, and they mentioned that, and they went, what do you think about Kaepernick? And I said, well, I think it's probably one of the most powerful non-violent demonstrations that we've seen since, you know, for many, many decades. I think it's absolutely incredible. They went, oh, you know, ruining our history, and, you know, they're ripping down those statues, you know, that's our history. So I'm like, hang on a second. So are you proud of slavery? And they went, well, no. And I went, right. So why would you want a statue, you know, lauding a slave trader, for example? Why would you be proud of that history? Would you want to show off about that? And they went, well, no, but, you know, and I said, well, then what is it? And they went, wow, just never really thought about it like that.
Yeah.
What? And then I said to them, look, I've got to ask you, you know, it's two lesbians, you walk into a bar in Florida and people judge you, right? They're making judgments on you because you're two women together. And surely, as another marginalized group of any group, maybe you could understand what it's like as a person of color, just to be walk into anywhere and just be judged, or have people make assumptions on you before you've even opened your mouth. Like, you must be able to feel, surely more than anyone, what's that like? And they went, just never really thought about it like that. And I was like, well, how do you think? And then I was in Vegas chatting to this couple in a pool, and we got into abortion. And the wife was trying to drag the husband away from me. We were having a drink on the edge of the pool. And she said, oh, you're one of them. Come on, let's get out of here. There'll be an argument. And I said, no, I'm just curious how you feel. Have you got daughters and sisters? And the husband went, yeah, we've got daughters and I've got two sisters. So I said, okay, and the wife was going, all those children, they could be adopted. They could be adopted. And I was like, well, it's not that simple. You know, children are born out of crisis, or born, you know, out of rape, but they have and poverty have very slim outcomes. You know, the chance of them having a good life, even if they're adopted, is slim. People don't want those children. People don't want to adopt those children. You know, it's not that simple. But I said, what if your daughter or your sister was raped? And would you really want to watch your sister go through that pregnancy? Would you want them to watch them have to go through the trauma of giving birth and then give away their child? Is that what you would want for your daughters or your sister? And he went, oh, I've just never thought about it like that. I'm like, I don't know, my mum and dad, I think just whenever there was a problem with someone, they would say, what's going on for them? Put yourself in those shoes. And that was where I was trained to think. That's how I was brought up. And not everybody had that. So many people, and I would challenge them in a really simple way, would just be like, just never thought about it like that. And so much lack of education and knowledge out there. But,
I mean, I love that you're willing to have those conversations with that openness, like you say, where you're not just shutting yourself off from everybody who doesn't agree with you. I think that's really healthy.
They're the people I reach, right? They had an article about me in the Daily Mail, and everyone was like, this is wicked, shame it's the Daily Mail, shame it's the Daily Mail, shame it's the Daily Mail. And I'm like, no, those,
that's where it needs to be.
Women who can't think outside, there's, living out in the countryside, I don't know, they're good housewives, men, they're the women I need to reach.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, now that you are here in the UK, and you observe these differences in culture and in our habits and our tendencies, and you're from here, what do you want to bring here?
Just continuing the message, really. I'm working with all sorts of different people at the moment. They're going, what are you trying to achieve? Like, where are you going? What's the big goal? What's the big thing? I don't really know. I'm just going on the journey. I'm off to talk about maybe working on and doing a podcast myself this afternoon with somebody. I've got a lady coming tomorrow. She's coming to rent some clothes for her birthday holiday. I'm doing some styling work with somebody. I'm going to do a public speaking event in the Bullring at the Birmingham Bullring Centre. They've asked me, the marketing team, they want a self-love revolution for Valentine's. I haven't told anybody this yet. So excited. I'm going to be in the Birmingham Bullring Centre 2 whole days doing like all Lou and Luland activities. There's going to be silent disco, styling. There's going to be sex talks. It's like wild. And that's come from the marketing director of the Bullring Centre follows me and is just like, I need you to come and bring it, whatever it is. Yeah. Figure it out. And I'm literally just figuring out with the Bullring team what that's going to look like and what the 2 days will look like. And then, of course, when the bus arrives, my vision is to hit some festivals, have a little Lou and Luland world, and have some fun going on and some talks and some crafting and I don't know what, take pictures and fun, just uplifting, just keep spreading the message, really.
You're very good, I hear, at living in the moment and trusting in the moment, Lou. What do you struggle with?
My son being America. That's proving harder than I thought, for sure. I spoke to him last night and it's bad when he's like, you need to ring me and talk to me more. And I was like, okay, sorry. I kind of wait for him because I don't want to pester him.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, good, that's good. Okay, yes, we'll do. Well, we had a wicked chat and he's really happy. And I did really realize that I probably couldn't. I thought I could do this and it didn't really matter where his dad was, because my argument for leaving America and leaving my son there to go to college was, I could be living here and he'd want to go to America to college and then it would just be back to front. But it feels really hard because I left him behind. So it feels, and he, of all the people, has been like, fuck yes, mum. I was like, before I left, I was like, I just can't. And he was like, I'll be so mad at you if you don't go. You have to go. And he's so supportive. But I also realized last night when I spoke to him that I couldn't do this, I don't think, if his dad wasn't great. He's living with his dad right now and he's got his dad on that continent. And so I still, even though we've separated and luckily it's an amicable, we're still friends, but I still have to trust him that, I'm lucky to be able to be in a position to trust him that he's doing the right thing by Oscar and that, I can be here doing what I need to do. So that was, I kind of really got to grips with that a bit last night after I'd spoken to Oscar. I feel quite grateful to my ex-husband for that. And I am incredibly fortunate, and we did work really hard at being able to have this relationship, being forced to stay in the same house after we separated for 2 years. I mean, that was fucking brutal. There were days when I was stood by the bedroom door and I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Morning, and it was just as hard for him. I'm the one in fact, it was harder for him, I would say, because I'm the one who was in charge of leading it and moving on, wanting to move on. He did not, you know, and I'm making videos in the bedroom next door going, I'm so happy. Look at my confidence. And my husband's going, okay. So yeah, they were tricky times, but I actually felt very empowered by separating. But I think I also felt empowered by the fact that we were figuring it out, and we put up, it was like we didn't have a lot of choice, mainly because of finances, but you know, it forced us into finding a better relationship for Oscar. And put him at the center of that. I mean, whether we've done the right thing for him or we've completely fucked him up, my hope is we modeled a different kind of parenting and separation and still being able to love each other and that.
You know, Lou, I mean, so many parts of your story I resonate with. I'll share one in a moment. But I remember saying to my daughter that exactly the same thing, you know, because I co-parent really well. My children's dad is a really great man and a friend. And, you know, I know that they're always in good care with him. And she said, you know, in your separation, please don't give yourself a hard time. She said, because I feel that we got the best of both of you rather than the worst if you'd stayed together, which is true. And then recently with my son being in hospital, as I said to you, you know, all this stuff came up from when I had to leave France. We were living in France at the time, and I couldn't bring my son with me at that time because there wasn't a place in the school. So there was a month period, and he was only little, like 5 years old. And there's something happening right now in me supporting him through this operation, because the night that he came out of surgery, I couldn't stay in the hospital. He was in a lot of pain, and the nurse had said to me, you know, we can put a mattress beside the bed if you want. And I just thought, it, like all these memories, as I said, you know, I'm going to go home and get some sleep, because then I'll be no good to him in the morning if I've not had some sleep. And I got all these flashbacks of leaving him in France all those years ago that were just agonizing. And then it was like, you're coming back tomorrow, everything's fine. And my good friend who I'm staying with here she said, Steph, that maybe that's your healing, that you realize that you had to walk away then to look after yourself, and you had to put on your own oxygen mask first. And that love never went anywhere. That support never went anywhere, because what I hear you describing in the way you live your life and the relationship that you have with your ex-husband and your son can only be good. It can only be good. You know, you care, you're present, you're there, you've spent time investing in keeping that relationship with your ex stable for your children. And, you know, I salute you. I admire that enormously, because it's not always an easy thing to do when we're navigating our own adult emotions and feelings.
I just think I find it terribly sad watching so many friends over the years separate, and just, you know, everybody gets lost in the separation process. It's so painful.
It really is. Yeah.
And the kids, you know, it's so hard, and you just never, I don't know.
So in these last moments, you know, in these last moments that we've got, Lou, is there anything that you would like to say to people and share that might be a message that's important to you that you think would benefit other people to hear?
I mean, I think, you know, sometimes being courageous or being brave or being bold or stepping towards what you want, it doesn't have to be buying a bloody broken down RV and driving around the States. It doesn't have to be, you know, wearing huge, crazy out. It's tiny things, I think, can make such a difference. You just switch your mindset to positive and just try and think about things in a different way, taking a breath, you know, and if you do, you know, go for a walk, you know, intentionally go for a walk, don't put music in, or do put music in, you know, if you want to be uplifted, you know. I think it's a build-up of all the positives. If I'm having a bad patch and I'm really struggling to see the light, I will write down all the good things that happen in a day if I'm having a bad day. And it can be somebody let me out at the traffic lights. It can be the smallest things. And these things sound quite obvious, but if you intentionally do them, like journaling, I'm a big believer in the journaling, just so you can see how far you've come. There's an incredible app. I met him at the Do lectures, actually, and he was so nervous before he spoke. He was sick outside, and he came in and presented, and he's developed an app. He suffers from depression, and he's always found it hard to articulate the words, and he developed an app called Mood, and you pick a color, say red, and you've got 6 different shades of red, and each day you just record where you are. So red's like I don't know, really miserable, or yellow, or lighter red as I feel jolly today. And it helps you build a pattern. And all it is colours. So you haven't got to find the word, you've just got to find the feeling. And then, so you haven't got to articulate it in any way other than clicking on a colour. And you can start to build a picture of how you feel, or follow, see if there's patterns in how your mood swings. So I'm using it for the shopping. I'm trying to see if it works for the shopping, like what's triggering when I want to shop. Can I see a pattern in it? So I'm using it for that.
Amazing.
So I'm give it a try and use that.
We'll link that underneath this talk. Sounds like a great app.
And particularly for men, because they find it sometimes harder to find the words.
Yeah.
So I find it that's quite interesting for men to use that. But I don't know, if you journal and you can read back, you can start to see, it's just so cathartic in lots of ways. You can be really honest sometimes when you start to try and intentionally think of the words. You find yourself being much more honest with yourself. And I think that's one of the things, like, you know, own up to shopping, like living without the shame of the finances is a huge thing for me, being by myself. And finally, I don't have to, you know, I've decided to shopping for myself. You know, I'm making decisions for myself now to try, you know, to shake shit up and see how it makes me feel. And then I'm intentional about feeling how I feel and seeing how I feel. And I'm like, so I like the good bits, and that's how I've managed to like the good bits and the bad bits, because I'm like, I know that the good will come after the bad. In fact, better always comes out bad.
This is, you know, this is a good place to end, because where I'm staying, my friend has a notice board in her little office that I slept in last night, and I looked up and there's a post-it note on there that says something good will come of this. And I think it's just a really nice place to land, that even when we're in difficult times, when we can hold that small but intentional faith and hope and awareness and all those qualities that sometimes are very difficult to connect with, it's there.
Find one thing to enjoy every day.
Find one thing to enjoy every day. Lou, thank you so much for this beautiful, inspiring talk. I could talk to you all day. I feel like
I talk all day as well.
Don't apologize. I think people need these messages, and you're going to send me your links, and we're going to post them below this video so that people can find you. And I hope that everybody has enjoyed this super, super inspiring talk with Lou Featherstone of Lou in Louland. Go check her out. She's just incredible. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, darling.